And we are live. Hello,
live.
We are here. We're here. I'm going to give you a moment to settle into your seats, but we're live right now. So everybody who's tuned in, do me a favor. Stop what you're doing. Share this with at least one person. You can drop it into somebody's DM. You can start a watch party. You can you can subscribe to CTN Media. However you want to do this, I want you to share this with at least one other person because it's going to get good today. Welcome to 7 Generations Black, the podcast powered to equip, inform, clear your lens, and present you with a new perspective. With Theo E.J. Wilson, H. Soul, Lethal, Jice Johnson, and I'm your host, Shay J. We are 7 Generations Black. So excited for you guys to be here with us. And if you've been on this ride, you know that it gets really good. So you're in for a treat. Like every other week, we're coming at you with the real, the raw, the unbought, and the unbossed conversation. Today, we're going to talk about the power of culture. We're going to get in and we're going to dig in a little bit about, as a culture, our spending habits, the demand, the market, and now the market has to show us a level of support. Last week, one of the favorite things we talked about for me was Black appeasement, but Theo hit on something that touched in a way that I never thought about it. Theo stated, you don't appease a people unless you fear them. But is it more than fear? In a capitalist society, is appeasement also tied to the dollars we spend? Let's dig into it. But first, you know what I have to do. I have to hit you with a red pill alert.
A red pill?
Red pill.
Red pill.
This is your last chance. After this, there's no turning back. This is your opportunity to stop listening and tune out now. Well, if you do, the story ends. And you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. However, if you take this 7 generations red pill, you stay here with us in a liberatory discussion, and we show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. So if I was you, I would share this out right now because this is a conversation you want to have at your kitchen table. Trust me. Now, if our spending habits drive the market, what would happen if we recognize the power of our culture? We talked about appeasement last week. Now it's time to talk about the power. Let's get into it. Let me remind you again who's on my amazing panel. The talented Theo E.J. Wilson of Shop Talk Live, Lethal, the Honorable Protector Initiative, H. Soul, the Righteous Rage Institute, Jice Johnson, the Black Business Initiative. So you know it's time for that conversation. Let's kick it off. Let's talk about it. First, before you get into this, I know we have so much to say because I think we've talked about this online, offline, a little bit every day in our lives, the power of our culture. I just want to talk about culture. Culture influences for a minute. Culture, when I was looking at what does culture mean? And it said culture is a means to increase power. I think a lot of times people don't realize that. Culture is a means to increase power. Power is a way to influence culture. Institutes have the power to influence culture, and culture have the power to influence institutes and society. So let's talk about the influence that our culture has. And we'll start it off with Jice Johnson. Let's talk about it. Now I know there's so much to say in this area. But as we start to talk about influence and what does that look like, let's just shed a little light on the power that we have in our own culture.
So I actually want to kick this off over to Lethal first because we had this robust conversation and he was really just dropping some gems. But I guess for my part of this, what I want to start off by saying in terms of, the power of our culture, I think that we don't always recognize how much influence that we have over the way that we spend in this country, over what things look like, how we influence marketing, media, fashion, music, movies and entertainment and all of these things, right? And so we have this place in this space in this country that is very interesting to me from an economic standpoint. And that's why I want to kick it off to Lethal first, because when I think about it from economics, right?
Absolutely.
And I want to kind of lay some of the groundwork in terms of like the history of how we can see the influence in our culture. So like, I'm going to pass it over to Lethal to jump.
I like that. Our economic guru, because she's going to get deep when she goes there. She's going to pass it off to you, Mr. Lethal. Talk a little bit about what it looks like in the power of culture and where we're at right now with that.
Okay. So when we're talking about the power of our culture, right? It's a subculture, right, of American culture, but it's a driving force, right? We're like the heart, the beating heart, right? We're like the blood, the life force, right? Look at, for example, hip hop, right? That is exclusively from us, right? We can go and look at soul, right? We can look at jazz. All of that is us. You understand what I'm saying? And if you take a look at what was happening late 70s, early 80s time frame, right? Hip hop, right, was a driving force behind, right, highlighting some of the issues that we were experiencing as a people in our individual different communities, whether it be East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, Southeast, Gulf Coast. It really didn't matter. You understand what I'm saying? We all had a story to tell. And hip hop is how that story was being told, or is the medium through that story, through which the story was being told, right? This is just a fact, right?
Absolutely.
But it was initially, you heard people talking about how, the same thing they said about rock and roll, that bubble, bubble, jabba, jabba, bongo, bongo music is not going to last, right? What they failed to understand was hip hop was more than just music, right? It was about the way you dress. It's about the way you talk, the way you walk, what the youngins today call swag or whatever they call it today. You know what I'm saying? That's what hip hop's about, right? It's about telling that story, right? And if you want to go even further back, and you think about it and you look at it, we talk about this black on black crime. Well, hip hop's original intent in existence was to stop black on black crime.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So instead of fighting, you had breakdancing. And that's how the groups were settled uptown in the Bronx, just as an example. You understand what I'm saying? It became monetized, meaning somewhere along the line, some executive and some business realized there was money that could be made. You see what I'm saying? And earlier when Jice and I were talking, she said something that I thought was very, very, very important. And I just want to hit on it real quick, right? It's a situation where it's our culture, right? But we're being made to pay to participate in it.
Absolutely.
And that just makes no sense to me. Another thing we talked about was how we could look at certain brands like Nike. Nike isn't Nike without us. Let's understand that, right? Timberland isn't Timberland without us. Tommy Hilfiger isn't Tommy Hilfiger without us. Even though back in the day they were, hey, I don't make my boots for them, and Tommy Hilfiger didn't want us wearing his clothes and things. You understand what I'm saying? But think about it this way. I want the audience to think about it this way, right? You have a generation of people in China, Japan, Korea, who could not speak a lick of English. However, they know every dang word to a Wu-Tang song.
That's real. Lethal, and you're hitting on so many things for me. When I'm thinking about the Black consumer, we've always been known as the trendsetters, the tastemakers. We're the consumers that all races look to say, what's it? We create a halo effect on the masses. We know that. But as you said, we're often taught how to buy into that. So many people elevate our culture instead of, we don't benefit from it though. When we're looking at that, so if you could talk to me a little bit about what that looks like when everybody else is benefiting from our culture, but we're not.
Ooh.
Let's see.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that everyone is benefiting from our culture. I wouldn't make that sweeping of a statement. I mean, we have I would say as a collective, we're not benefiting from the culture, right? And so there's a remedy for that, which of course is inextricably tied to the social economic system that we're currently implementing in our own neighborhoods. What I'm loving to see at this point is that there seems to be a resurgence of this concept called the susu, and these collective forms, collective economics, and the more that we get back to which of course is in our culture, right? And the more that we get back to that and we're centered in that, the more that the masses will benefit from the talent that the masses produce. We have to remember that, and I think to Lethal's point, that hip hop was created by the collective. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't created by Grandmaster Flash and African Bambaataa. Those were personalities that emanated from the collective of what was taking place in the Bronx, right? And in New York at that time. And so we just have to go back and fetch it. Sankofa as another term of our culture. We just have to go back and collect ourselves and get out of this, get rich, die trying from an individualistic perspective.
That's good. Theo, I would really like to hear your point on this. And what I love most is we have so many different perspectives. So those of you listening, you're supporting independent Black media. Continue to do that. Make sure you go donate, share this out. It's important that we keep voices like this alive. Theo, as we know, culture in the arts is an elevated sense of beliefs. Like when we talk about culture, we started really with the arts. We elevated that to a set of beliefs. And a lot of people took that from our music, from our identity, from how we wear, from how we did our hair. You being an artist, what do you see right now with everybody kind of changing that tune during this time of protesting and all that, the music coming back with some more meaning? What do you feel like right now during this time?
I feel like it's a replication of what's always been. Number one, Black culture is the only thing that could be said it is unique about American culture. That's it. From literally the beginning, from jazz music to gospel, you know what I mean, all the way up to hip hop and whatever's beyond it. It's the only thing about American culture that's marketable, that is original to America. And it has always been that way. And Black people always adapt their culture to the ethos of the times. So Get Richer by Trying is actually one of the ethos of this time. Literally, that is how we adapted in the new integration era when our values started to be getting dictated by consumer culture and not the culture within our culture. See what I'm saying? It's the same thing. Like when you look at the music that we created in the 50s, 60s, it was a lot of movement music because that was the ethos of the time. Does that make sense? So, literally 50s Black music, we were trying to assimilate. So you have music that sounds like brothers and, trying to fit into the mainstream genres of that time. So what we need to do is understand that, number one, they've always been afraid of us having control of the distribution network. So there's a great movie on Netflix right now called, it's like Who Killed Sam Cooke, or like How They Killed Sam Cooke.
Oh, yeah. The second death of Sam Cooke or something. Yeah.
Right. And so one of the things that was very interesting about Sam Cooke is that he made it super big mainstream. And then he began to talk to Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X about actually having a distribution network to be that we could profit from it and to fund the movement. See what I'm saying? They've always shown that there was a power with, if you can get Black folks to just produce it and then they profit from it, then they get all the actual power from it. But if we begin to profit from our music and the things that we produce, we can easily and have tried to before leverage that for our liberation. It's always been very, very, very scary about the things that we create. And they've put concerted effort into that. When I got homies who were in high school during the switchover between Public Enemy and NWA, and they will tell you, they was like, yo, when the music changed, the homies switched up too. Like there was cats talking about that fight to power, and the next thing they was talking about, you know what I'm saying, rolling down the street on my street, right? The fact that like there is a powerful influence that it has on the mind, and they got the more toxic version with corporate money, the more toxic version of our rap, and they made that more marketable. You see what I'm saying? They literally defunded conscious hip hop because they knew that there was a possibility that they could lead us more into violence. It's been powerful. It always has been. We can get into the African origins of why our music does what it does to the human brain a little later on. But they've always known that if we have control over the distribution of it, then we'll use that profit to leverage our freedom. And that's the issue we have with our culture on all fronts.
Right. So that, like what you're saying right there, and I don't know like how much we're driving this point home. And I want to encourage everybody, if you're watching right now, like one, hit the thumbs up, because we want to get the algorithms up and we want to get this message out. I can't tell you how many people have been hitting us up on the back end saying, man, I see what you're doing, but what I need you to do is I need you to actually share this out and encourage other people to log in and tune in so that we can really begin to have a robust conversation in our community. Because this right here is something that what Theo was saying is, I don't think that we are really recognizing like the power of what is actually being said, what Theo actually just said, right? So we start off a narrative, right? We start off a narrative based on the times, based off of, you know, what's happening inside of our communities, right? So when we look at what was happening in hip hop initially, you know, there was an ability to amass us around a common language and a common thing that we understand. One of the things Theo just said, which we didn't get into, which is like why our music resonates so deeply, right? Which you can touch more on that, but I understand, you know, it's the beat that gets to you. White folks love that shit. It doesn't matter. You know, where they try and go with it. It's like there's something that gets into you when the music is there, right? You remember things. If you think about how you teach kids stuff, you teach them through song,
Yes,
through movement. You know, so there's something to understanding how important the hip hop culture was, and even prior to that, other cultures, right? There's other music genres that have had a similar effect, but in the present day, there's something to understanding how important the hip hop culture is to being able to help move us forward in the fight for our freedom. And so what they did was they really turned it around and they began to co-opt. So for the last several, 2 decades, maybe going on 3 decades, there's been bullshit music. Quite frankly, they lost me with mumble rap altogether. Like now we're not even saying words, right? And so it's a little bit ridiculous, but it's to understand something about how deeply you can send subliminal messaging through, you know, repeated messaging, repeated beats, repeated, you know, things of that sort that can stick with you, where you'll be humming something and you don't even realize what you're humming, right?
yes.
I had a parenting fail when my, at the time, 3-year-old was over here singing that she was making, you know, Cardi B money moves, right? And so my daughter's like, you know, she's singing a whole chorus, and I'm like, oh, wait, hold on, don't say, oh, okay. Fail, just total parenting fail, right? But I say all that to say, like, listen to what's kind of starting to shift right now. You can't even put out no song about being rolling on meth and being high on some shit and you know, mumbling some ridiculousness and talking about hoes and this and that and the other, which you could have just a few months ago. But ever since the protest started and ever since we've gotten back to business, you know, pushing this message, you can't come out with that right now. We're not having that. We're not hearing none of that, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that they have been able to take what we were leading in and then turn us into the followers of our culture and our own messaging, where we are no longer the ones who are pushing our message in order to free ourselves, but now we're following behind them and just going whichever which way the wind blows or whichever which way the corporate dollar is going, is a very powerful idea about how important our culture really is, how much it can really change and how much it can change us, how much it can rally us, and then what they've been able to do over a few dollars. And you can only do that over dollars when we have really pushed us to the place of consumerism. So consumerism is what is holding the ultimate key and the ultimate leverage, because if we didn't care so much about buying the big house and the big car and all the diamonds and the latest cell phone, you could not convince us to change our message for a few dollars.
And Jice, you're leading me right into my next point, because companies are recognizing the Black consumer power. They're recognizing it right now, especially in the heat of what's going on. They're literally saying we're 1.2 trillion in 2019, and we're set to be at 1.4 trillion by 2020. The Black consumer power is real. So when you're looking at companies like Coca-Cola that have a robust marketing branch that focuses on Blacks, they have a kitchen table that's a digital cooking book for the African-American mothers. They have all these consumers, and then they have $193 million discrimination case for Blacks saying that they don't treat them well. And then you have things like McDonald's. We know McDonald's has always geared their things toward the African-American. Once again, McDonald's has 31 out of 37 top Black execs have been pushed out of McDonald's, and now they're all fighting a lawsuit. So when we're looking at, they know our buying power, our consumer power, and then we look like how we buy, we know we buy cosmetically, like you said, we buy about the things that make us feel good. How do we switch that mindset? What is that switch? Because it's been happening for so long.
Well, I think it's important to understand the pattern of history as it repeats and then interrupt that pattern. And we as a people still have one major cultural flaw within us that came from the plantation, that came from our internalized oppression. And that is, we still believe that the white man's ice is colder, even if he flavors his ice in our drink. Like even if,
right.
Even if it's our stuff, if it came out of his refrigerator and it's still our ice, we're just gonna think it's that much, right? And so we believe in America more than we believe in ourselves. That's the most important problem here. And since
say it again, Theo. Say it again.
You can say that for the masses again.
Say that again.
We believe in America more than we believe in ourselves. And we haven't overcome that mental hurdle yet. And until we overcome that mental hurdle, we are not able to take the steps necessary to actually face off with the beast and get control of our distribution anymore. We have the literal definition of cool is Black. Like, the literal definition, and it's been that way since Miles Davis, long before, like, you know what I'm saying, Tupac got a hold of it. Like, feel me? Like, all that is dope, all that is fly is us. And if you want to do it, you got to do it like us. Your version ain't gonna cut it, and the world knows it, right? And so therefore, we have all of the tools necessary except for the necessary mindset, because we haven't overcome it. Once we overcome that, then it's going to be like what I said. Like Tina Turner didn't realize that she was the power behind Ike. And then finally did. By the time I was born, I didn't know Ike. I didn't know Ike till the movie came out. See what I'm saying? So, like, she was always the brains of the operation. She was always the freaking power. And we'll get into this other aspect of power later. I've been talking long enough.
Woo, Theo, I mean,
No, but you said some good stuff in there, Theo. That's important. It's important.
It's so important. So I feel like you've been quieter than usual. Tell me where your head's at. What are you thinking?
No, I mean, I'm in total agreement with what Theo is saying. I think that for this discussion, that there's a lot of alignment there. Again, I think that our weakness rests in our having bought into individuality. And it's this individuality mindset, even of those executives inside of McDonald's. I guarantee you, why wasn't there a Black executive union, right, that existed inside of that corporation? Why does that not exist? Well, that doesn't exist because of what was stated earlier, that plantation mentality, that if one of us is getting strung up, the rest of us need to be as far away from that person as possible, so that we don't incur the wrath of massive. But what is happening inside of the Black executives inside of McDonald's, that's what's supposed to happen when you're not a unified force. And so it's unfortunate that they have to wait in order for that to happen. Now they're unified in going against the corporation. Now they're unified. But if that unification would have been there at the front end, that wouldn't have occurred through that experience. And so until we learn to be unified on the front end instead of the back end, we will continue to get kicked in our back ends until we get that message.
That was a word. That was a word, because that collective part, I think we've talked about that a lot. You know, everybody wants to be the J and B. Very few people want to be Huey P. Newton. It's just not happening like that. Very few. And when we look at that, Lethal, I would like you to tap into that because you always talk about what we look like as a collective and how that changes the game.
So going back to Theo and H's point, right, about what we have bought into, right? I want our folks out there to understand this, right? This whole piece about the pursuit of happiness and life and liberty, that speaks to the individual. And that is anti-African. You understand what I'm saying? That's not what we subscribe to. You understand what I'm saying? Historically, ancestrally, in our heritage. You understand what I'm saying? You know, the what's the saying? It's takes a village.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? That's our motto. That's our mantra. And so I think it was in an earlier episode, either Theo or H spoke to the fact that, you know, not only is capitalism as a system, right, the opposite of what we know to be true, being descended from Africans and whatnot, right? But, you know, this whole ideology associated with the individual and putting the individual person's needs before those of the collective masses, right? So as individuals, right, we buy into this ideology, right? And then we turn our nose down and we look back at our brothers and sisters that are still in the struggle, right? And we get this complex where we think that we're the cream and we rose to the top. You understand what I'm saying? And that's not really the truth. That's not really the case, right? And I just had this conversation not too long ago with a couple of brothers, and we were talking back and forth. And what I said to them is this, right? It's not our own little individual determination and hard work. There's also some blessings and covering from our ancestors.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And once you start to forget that and you start to attribute it to yourself, that's when you find yourself in a situation where you're too afraid to be uncomfortable because you bought into this system of materialism.
Absolutely.
I don't want to lose my house. I don't want to lose my car. I don't want to lose my clothes. I don't want to lose my cable. I don't want to lose my membership to this exclusive club and things of that nature. You understand what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, you know, like I said before when I first started this, right? We are the lifeblood. We are the soul. We are the heart. We are the spirit of this society. And Theo spoke to it brilliantly when he said, hey, yo, think about it. You know, our culture, right, is the only thing that's really truly marketable about American culture.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we're watching that. We're watching it happen in real time. We said something.
No, I was just saying that square dancing is not worldwide marketable. Like that shit right there, like that shit that Irish people do, that ain't going nowhere, man.
No.
It might be fun to do for, you know, every now and again, but that ain't gonna rock the party all night. The point that I wanted to make is, and Jice talks about this often, is mindset on an individual level, and I think Jay-Z is a perfect example of that for us to understand as an example for Black people. When you look at Jay-Z now and you hear his music now, it's a music, he's wearing locks now, he's, you know, he's talking shit now because now he has the money to. But what Jay, where he was, and you study this, was that he was bitching, hoeing, busting caps on niggas. He was the quintessential capitalist. And so there's this mentality that exists in the Black community is that you can be ruthless in order to make it. Then once you make it, then you're Nelson Mandela. And that's a backwards mentality, that sickness that we have. And I support Jay and Tadao, and I think all that should be now. But what I'm saying is when we teach our children to forego the collective, as Lethal said, to be an individual over the collective in order to make it, and then now that you make it, you locked up your hair, you know, you're supporting Black, like, that's not the shit you was talking to get there, homie. That's not the shit you was talking to get there. And that was damaging to so many Black minds. So now you're just trying to make amends for how you got to the top of the pile. And that did not cut it for us.
Yeah.
Right. But the
We
thing
know
is,
authentic. You
at
can't
that
say
level, we don't even hold them accountable. We never go back and say, like, you need to go back and renounce what you've done. You know, we just let that shit just kind of slide, right? So like Jay-Z never really goes back and says, you know, the music that I was putting out is wrong. I mean, you might catch it in an interview or something like that, you know, if you listen to him deeply, but he's not going back and like really, you know, addressing, you know, what it is that he's done to the community from his own voice, from his own, you know, and a lot of that is coming out of his own experience at that time, right? But it's like then his experience begins to change. You sit down in some different rooms. Some people can break things down to you, you know. So we come from this mentality where we're okay to be sold out because it's that consumerism, you know, standpoint. And this is something that I haven't really gone deeply into, but I actually had an opportunity today just in kind of in another conversation that I had today and talking about the protests and kind of what's going on. And someone was just kind of asking me, you know, like, I haven't seen you out at the protest. I haven't seen you, you know, and I don't want to segue, but ultimately what we were talking about is like the act of self-care and what I have to do to stay focused on my goal and my mission and, you know, whatever. Right. And as we were talking about that, I was really going into some of the reasons why I'm a minimalist, because I had to break away from the idea of consumerism. I like nice things. I like my stuff to be whatever it is. I don't walk around in minimalism because I can't afford. I walk around in minimalism because there is something to breaking the hold that consumerism has on you, so you can think clear enough to make decisions that are not solely based on somebody giving me something so I can go and buy something in order to feed something that's missing inside of me, right? So there was a process in which I had to really take away quite a bit. And we see this in other areas, right? You fast for clarity. You know, there are places where you remove something from yourself in order for you to be able to get to a space where you are thinking more clearly. Well, for me, I became a minimalist in the beginning in order for me to start breaking away from the hold that consumerism has, the hold of what it looks like for me to want you to see what kind of bag I'm rocking today, and what kind of heels I got on, and what car I'm driving today, and what my house looks like. And so then I can begin to make decisions that were based in what's best for myself, what's best for my family, what's best for my community. And as a part of that, you know, I'm able to now move forward in a way that's a lot more clear thinking. So, you know, I see that coming from us in this space where we don't go back and hold people accountable to where consumerism maybe had them held in, but the damage that caused at that time.
Yeah. No, Jice, you're onto something. You know, that's why the Rastafari call America Babylon. That's why. Because Babylon is the empire built on the senses. You see what I'm saying? It's the empire built on the ego. And, you know, my Christian brothers and sisters used to say, we fight not against flesh and blood, but the principalities of good and evil and wickedness in high places. You know what I'm saying? And what that is about is it has no hooks in you if you don't have holes for that hook. Yeah. That was put into our soul through our experience of being deprived, right? Birthdays, but now we sip champagne when we thirsty. That's a hole. Yep. That's putting you, that's deprivation. You see what I'm saying? And so Dr. Amos Wilson has a great book called The Psychology of the Black on Black Criminal. What it goes into is that in our traumatized state, we were modeled power in a way that made us envious of what we did not have. And we haven't overcome that quite yet, because through that trauma, number one, the traumatizers are still traumatizing, right? And we are still inflicted on that. I find it so interesting. I ask myself, how does our culture keep making cool every generation? How do we do that? Like literally every new form of the cool, we always on the front edge of it. Every new on the front edge, every new rap on the, even if it's mumble rap, we're on the front edge of that. And they have the how does it happen?
We shouldn't have been on the front edge of that.
Right.
We shouldn't be. Let's just be clear on that point.
Look.
Even when we're wrong, we're right, goddammit.
Right. But there's an answer to that question. And the answer to that question is because America never unengineered the circumstances that had us poor, that created the culture against our poverty, right? It never unengineered the ghetto, never. Feel me? It never unengineered racism, and never unengineered policing. In fact, it exacerbated, poured gasoline on it. Because at the end of the civil rights movement, there's always been the underculture in the Black community of like hustling. That's always been there, pimping, always been there. But it was an underculture, right? It was expected that after a while you graduate from that stuff, you get a job at the factory like Joe Jackson, you make some money and support a family, right? It was expected that you would graduate from that. When a Black America got deindustrialized, the under economy becomes the top economy. And then that gets fuel poured on that fire, the dope game, the crack, the gangbanging, all of that, which was always there. But now that becomes, and then we created that culture again, made it cool. And what was so crazy about hip hop is that we became the funkiest, flyest Babylonians in Babylon. We literally, all the swag, all the mustard, to the point where America wishes that it could have as much swag in its capitalism and in its consumerism as we have. But we did that to survive. They never unengineered that stuff. And so therefore the culture keeps on producing it. And we got to figure out that cycle, which is why we have conversations like this.
So I'm going to put in here, Shay, real quick. I want to introduce something real quick, right? Going off of Theo's point, right? Just adding on to it, right? What comes to mind for me is compensatory spending, right? This is a term that just came to me. Like, I think last week I was listening to the sister on Sirius XM radio, or listening to a show, Karen something, right?
Oh, yeah.
You had, say again?
Yeah, comes after the Eagle.
Yeah,
I know you're talking about.
Yeah,
right after the Eagle.
This Reverend DeForest Story, I think is his name, Story, some of that, right? And he was talking about compensatory spending, right? And what he's basically saying is that, you know, because of the conditions that we've been in for so long that Theo spoke to, right, with regards to it never being unengineered, right? And then when we attempted to have our own sort of like Black Wall Streets and how they got attacked, burnt down, and to Sister Jice's point, there was no accountability for any of those type of atrocities against us when we were standing on our own 2 feet, doing our own thing, not asking for help, not looking for help, not even wanting help. You understand what I'm saying? They were destroyed, right? And so compensatory spending is like we're overcompensating or we're compensating. You understand what I'm saying? And we purchase things and we get involved and become so deeply entrenched in capitalism, right? As a way of making ourselves feel good and mentally increasing our own value, right? Because if you keep telling me I'm garbage, and then I'm able to go out here and I purchase the Escalade, right? And I'm stepping out with the flyest suits, and I'm stepping out here with the dopest jewelry, and I got the baddest sister getting out the passenger seat. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to the dopest. Yeah, I'm going to the dopest clubs, the dopest lounges, and things of that nature. You understand what I'm saying? That begins to make me feel good. It gets back to something Jice said before and something H said last time we spoke, right? We got to get up out of our emotions.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So what? We're not liked. So what? We're not loved. Big deal. You know what I'm saying? Like, so what? We know what's right and we know what's wrong. And until we make that mindset change to do what we know is right and in the best interest of us as a collective, I mean, we're going to have this conversation 7 generations from now.
Yeah, but let me tell you, you just hit on something that's important around that, you know, that idea, right? Because this is something that I'm seeing. And then I want us to make sure that we pivot to talk about where the economic twist in all of this is. But I think what you just said is really important because when you're right. So what, who cares if they like us or if they don't like us, right? But it's difficult, you know, I get the double side of that, right? Because we understand, like, when you talk down to children, and this is the way that we've been brought up, right? So we've been brought up being told we ain't this, we ain't that, we can't never, we're not, no, all these negative, you know, influences put on us. So there's something that it does to the esteem. So once you break free of that, it's easier to look back and say, I don't care what you think, right? I don't care how you feel. I don't care if you like me. I don't walk up into this job. I don't walk into, into this store for you to like me. I don't walk, I don't spend my life worrying about whether or not, for me now at this point, I don't spend my life worrying about whether or not white folks like me, right? But I'll tell you what, when another brother or sister in the community approaches me in a way, that challenges my integrity or challenges my intent and things like that, that cuts, right? Because there are things that we build ourselves up off of, but I say that to say this also, plays a role in what's happening from a cultural perspective, because the music and the things and the stuff that we listen to have really made a space for us to mentally process how hard life has been. Being on the grind, right? Thinking about your hustle, right? I stay grinding, right? I remember someone, an older person said, "Why do you say rise and grind? Who wants to get up and grind every day?" And I was like, "Shit, I do. Like every day I'm on the hustle, I'm on the grind, right?"
Every day I'm hustling.
Right, and there's this space where the music and the influence and the culture has allowed you to mentally process your everyday struggle and see it from a certain perspective. And now the types of things, and this is something that I've really rejected, has been listening to the way that people are saying, if it doesn't bring me peace, it's got to go. And if it, and we need to have safe space here, and we need to have balance, and and all these things that are very contradictory to this idea that you go through struggle. And I struggle with that messaging because it creates weakness. Everything that we see grows in strength through struggle, but not so much struggle that you kill it, right? Like weeds go through concrete, but if you put some, you can keep killing them and breaking them down into their nothing, but there's also a level in which that struggle is necessary. So I think it's really about how we find a balance in the culture to say we have to take care of ourselves, but we also have to recognize that struggle creates strength, and struggle pressure creates diamonds. You have to work out your muscles in order to grow strength. We see flowers grow through the dirt, right? So there's something to that, but not so much that it kills you.
Right, John.
And Jice, I just want to say something on that real fast. I think that, I was just listening to that. We know that Black women are a big part of the power of our culture. And a Black woman, one of the things she sent me the other day, and it resonated with me. It said, "Please stop calling Black women strong as a compliment. Strong is why our mortality rate is down, why medicine is high. Strong is why pain is not taken seriously. Strong is why they have less empathy for us. Strong is why we're put last in every movement, because everybody knows we can handle it." And that hit me in a different place, because I was so used to being like, I'm a strong Black woman. I'm a strong Black woman. And then I realized how many things were taken out of context because we're so used to being the strong Black woman.
Absolutely. And how do we find that balance in between, to be able to get through the tough times, because they are going to come, and you do got, when I'm running uphill, like I got to listen to that Nas, I got to listen to that Jay-Z, I got to listen to that T.I. That's going to help push me. And then how do I make sure that I'm still caring for myself? How do I take the recovery time that I need so that my muscles grow and they're not overtaxed, right? Go ahead, Theo. I'm sorry I cut you off.
Yo, no, it's all good. Listen, you guys said you ladies said some very powerful things. So there is, so that strength element is a double-edged sword, right? Because it creates a stereotype that we're invulnerable in the minds of people who be hurting us, and they just be hurting us, right?
Right.
And also, our culture itself was only made from the Africans who could cut the mustard. Everybody else died, right? Everybody else got weeded out, and it accelerated natural selection. That's what made us. That's how we show up in the world the way that we do, right? And so you're right. The problem with the culture is that we may be so used to struggling this way that we can't turn our face this way to see that the door is open, right? We're so used to fighting this fight in this way that we are completely absent sometimes of the tools that could get us even out of this quote unquote struggle to begin with. And if we find these tools, we feel cultural pressure to be like, nah, if I do this, I ain't loyal to the culture. Feel me? Because I remember I started making more money the less harder I worked when I started working within my purpose, right? when I found my purpose to work in, I actually stopped working as hard.
Yep.
Like literally, my old job was as a freaking home gutter because I was strong. I'd take a hammer and gut a home, right? And I would get paid something to the effect of $7 an hour. This was back in 2004 when you can do that, right? Versus when I'm on stage speaking, I could do this all day, right? And that doesn't even feel like work to me. But then I was like, dang, am I hustling hard enough? Or did I just find my locus of actual attraction that I could bring shit to me, right? Feel me?
Mm-hmm.
And so that became, then I was in conflict, like, yo, I need to be hustling harder, right? And perhaps I needed to be a little bit more diligent with my work. But the fact is that there's other tools in the universe that your culture can stop you from seeing or using, right? And there is a freedom in that. Like, don't get so used to struggling that you don't see the door to freedom. And that's something that we have to figure out because they're not synonymous.
I think the key to figuring that out, Theo, is to understand and for us to inject into the culture or re-inject into the culture. Again, none of this is new, is what our ancestors put on the pyramids, which is know thyself. And I don't mean that in some abstract sense. I mean that in the sense of you figured out what your talent was. Once you figured out what your talent was, what your passion was, or as the Japanese call it, your ikigai, then you were able to tap into that and become and work less difficult. That is not really seen when you start talking about yoga and stretching and shit like that in the Black community and drinking water, right? Dave Chappelle has some shit that talks about, you know, he want that grape drink instead. Like in our culture, we want the soda.
What is juice?
What is juice?
Drinking this motherfucker.
No, it's real. I remember I didn't want to feel like a sellout. So I was like, maybe I should stop doing yoga because everybody was looking at me like I was crazy. And I know those of you that are tuning in, you're enjoying this conversation. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe to CTN Media on YouTube because this is what it looks like to have an unbossed conversation.
Right.
I want to wrap this around before we get out of here. And just, we know they market to us because there's so much power in culture. They market to our babies on a mass amount. As we command the respect from the market, how do we leverage this power that we have? When we look at it in a 7-generational lens, because we're not going to let our people fall. That is our job at 7 Generations Black. How do we start to leverage this power?
Let me jump in and say something on this. I'm gonna go to an African proverb, right? No matter the economy of the jungle, the lion will never eat grass. I just
Say
said
that again.
no matter the economy of the jungle, the lion will never eat grass. Never eat grass. You understand what I'm saying? I'm gonna let our people out there just sort that out in their mind. You see what I'm saying? Let that soak in, soak that up. You understand what I'm saying? And I also want to just put this out there from Brother Minister Malcolm X, right? If you are not willing to die for it, take that word freedom out of your vocabulary.
Wow. Well, who's gonna hit that next?
So,
our economic guru, I would love for you to touch on that because we need to learn how to really leverage our power.
say that again.
I said, economic guru, how are we going to leverage this power? What are we going to do?
Well, first, I want to re-highlight what he just said. I mean, if you're not willing to die for freedom, let's stop talking about. And I think that's important. I think that's important. And this is, coming from my paradigm as someone who joined the military after 9/11, right? So, granted, I came from a different space at that time, but there was something to understanding what freedom meant and thinking about how I was ready to, take up arms at that time for this country, which, when I was 18, I didn't know the fabric of this country, right? But I know the fabric of who we are as a people, and I think it's so important for us to think about what that looks like, because while we're out there marching in these streets and while we're out there, causing a lot of ruckus and having people think. I think it's something for us to understand about what this means inside of this country, and so much of us talk about death, but we don't have a good relationship to understand what that really looks like. And we see death in the way that it is always presented to us, which is, in this very violent, not for a noble cause, not for martyrdom, not for, any of that. It's being snatched away from us while we're living, and it's certainly being snatched away from us literally in death, right? And so I would say from the economic standpoint though, and I'm just trying to shift my thought, because
I know this might have to be a part 2, because this is good conversation.
Right. Like what he said, that's a very powerful statement for us to think about what it is that we're saying. Because again, if we think about what we have, if we think about the power of our culture, we can make a rallying cry out of freedom, right? We can make a rallying cry out of what it looks like to die for a cause that advances our next generation. And I don't think that that's always what we're talking about. And then oftentimes I think we're looking at the right here and the right now. And this is something that H has said so many times is, those who started the pyramids, they didn't see the capstone put on. And so oftentimes we're thinking about right here today and not necessarily what we have to do to move the needle truly forward. So, I say all that to say, I think it's absolutely right. The market, we command the market. We command the market more than we know. And until we understand our power, until we understand what it looks like for us to create a rallying cry, what it looks like for us to create culture and not just be on the consumerist end of it, right? What it means for us to create, control the means of disbursement, control the logistics of the culture that we are ultimately creating and not advancing from. Until we understand the power behind that, I think that we will be continuously subjected or be in a subjugated position. So I think we have to recognize, and some of that is going to be, I always talk about propaganda. Some of that is going to be re-educating ourselves on how our culture has played a role and how our bodies have played a role in what we see in America today, so that we understand the power of who we are and our culture. And so we are in so many senses from an economic standpoint on that bottom rung, but that means that we have the literal ability to pull the rug out from underneath this country. We are the fucking rug.
We are the country.
A whole lot of shit is gonna fall. But if we don't understand that, we see ourselves as a doormat and not see ourselves as having the ability to move where this country goes based off of how we move together as a collective.
That's great. So I need you to wrap your comments for us. I know you got something good for me. I know you do.
Yeah. So there's an African, and I'm putting this in the context of what we're seeing today as far as the uprising that's taking place inside of the community, and what I feel is grossly missing, and why this is just going to be this continuous loop. And it comes from, I would like to center that analysis in an African proverb that says, once we defeat the enemy within, the enemy without can do us no harm. Yes. And the problem is that we as a people have not focused on defeating the enemy within ourselves. And I see that stated on this line here, where they talk about how we raise our children and what we, like the things that we do to ourselves. Let's be very clear. Let's be very fucking clear right here. It was black hands that put black bodies onto white-owned ships. Let's be very clear about that.
Say it again, H. Say it again, H. A lot of people don't believe
black hands that put black bodies onto white-owned ships.
White man couldn't get no African.
That's right. Y'all saw how fast OJ was running on that Serengeti, y'all. Wasn't no white dude about to catch OJ. And so what I'm saying to that is that that was an internal issue that we already had with each other, and we still struggle with that internal issue now, where we are not developing our own greatness, our own detachment. Like Jice would just say, we need to do a whole show on what Jice just got finished saying around her detachment from European psychopathic culture. And unless we detach from it, there ain't no getting free. There's no getting free. There's no the white man doesn't have to do anything if we are still attached to his value system. And so if we're part of that value system, then I don't want to fuck flipping over a car if you can't flip over your own pocketbook, if you can't flip over your children's grades, if you can't flip over the education that they're receiving, then what are you flipping over?
Better come through.
Flip over. We need to flip over our own addictions. We need to detach. And until we detach, until we defeat the enemy within ourselves, then I don't want to hear about white folks and crackers and whatever, because this is what will happen. If we built Wakanda tomorrow, it would just be black people on a white plantation. We would just emulate exactly what we're attached to right now. So until we divorce ourselves from white culture within,
come on,
then fuck flipping your cars, man.
But you know what? To get to that, and this is why these conversations are so important. And I know we're coming to the end, but I'm still going to encourage everybody to hit the thumbs up, support independent Black media, and share this conversation out. Because here's the reality of what you're saying. And this is why, I literally I said, maybe I need to do like a propaganda 101 something, right? Because we don't understand how deeply ingrained the messaging is. It's not, we're sitting here as a group of folks who have spent dedicated time distancing ourselves from racist white, violent white racist, bullshit, right? So, but it has taken a lot of time and work, and by far is still not all the way there. It is a continual work in process, because for 36 years, this is what's been ingrained, and it's taken me time to continuously build myself out of, recognize when I'm seeing, violent white, y'all know I don't say white supremacy, so violent white racist thoughts, when I'm seeing, these things pop up. It takes time for me to be able to watch a show and see all the things that are going on inside of that TV show or inside of that movie, and still be able to sit down and, to a certain extent, enjoy it, right? It's entertainment, but recognize the messaging, and then tell myself, actually, I probably shouldn't have taken my teenage daughter to see that. Now we have to have a deep conversation so that I can undo a lot of the messaging that was done inside of that show or inside of that movie, right? So we literally have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year of messaging coming at us that is by and large bullshit. And if you're not being conscious of what you're consuming inside of all that messaging, even from what you're driving past on billboards, from what is written on the back of your, on the back of your nutrition packets, which is a whole lot of mumbo jumbo that nobody understands, to what you were, watching on TV, to what you were getting on YouTube, to what's streaming through your phone. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So when we're getting all of that, it's not easy for us to break away and and build ourselves up from that mentality. But in order for us to be successful, we've got to figure out a way to do it. And that's why we have to I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I really want to be very serious. This is not just like a self-promotion of what we're doing here. It's important that we change the narrative. It's important that we have independent Black media that can put a different perspective out there, because these types of conversations are not happening mainstream. This is not being on 9 o'clock news and 7 o'clock news and 5 a.m. news, and it's not on regular radio. This is not happening. For you to get this, you have to intentionally put it in your ear.
That's good.
The rest of the messaging is just being pushed at you, whether you like it or you don't.
Let's be intentional about what we're listening to. Theo, take us out with your comment, please, before I wrap us up.
My elders said white supremacy is the devil in you when I asked them how to defeat it. And what I've seen time and time again in my life is that the more I get a mastery of myself, the less doesn't eliminate it all the way. I have to be concerned about whatever powers are outside of me. You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's true self-knowledge, feel me? One thing that we got to get really in this conversation is incomplete, I feel, without the understanding. I said it before, the difference between understanding hard power and soft power when it comes to the power of our culture. right? Because the thing they always hated us to get was the hard power, the distribution networks, the ability to profit and create residual income and off that. You see what I'm saying? Our culture is the gasoline and the American empire is the engine. That's why we're so influential, right? There's been a concerted effort for us not to build our own engine. And the reason why it is because you know what happens when you build your own engine. Then you can drive away from these motherfuckers. That's literally what we plan on doing. So instead of doing that, we don't even invest in ourselves in that way. What the thing about our culture that I find the most interesting though, is we're a culture of survivors. And that's a double-edged sword. Because we're confronted with white supremacy. When Native American was confronted with white supremacy, they'd be like, starve me, player. I'd rather die, right? The Arab man, he was like, man, look, I'm blowing me and you up today. You know what I'm saying? Allahu Akbar, you can't do this to me, right? The African made a different choice. We decided to survive by any means necessary, even if it became us becoming beggars. We survived. Even if it meant us being subservient, we survived. And that survival was always betting on the fact that our children would take up the torch. I am the hope and the dream of the slave, right? But the fact is that if we don't interrogate our survival by any means necessary and how it meant that we would not confront death, and how it meant that we would not go headlong into our ending of life if it meant that freedom was on the other side for our babies, then we haven't uprooted what we've inherited in our survivalism. And that's a piece of our culture that we need to unpack. Just because we survived didn't mean that we survived intact and strong. And now we got to look at that because we're having to face what might look like certain death if we're going to get free. And we need to console somebody because like that mechanism might be at least broken in our culture. And it's a precedent.
Now, this is how I know there's going to be a part two, because this conversation is not over. And that's the point of 7 Generations Black. We're not here just to have the conversation, but we're here to help you change your perspective, to give you a new lens to look at. Remember, we're talking about the power of culture. It's in our songs, it's in our dance, it's in what we write, it's in what we do. We're influencing the whole entire world. I think there's so many levels to this conversation that this cannot be the end. And like Jice said, we have to unlearn to relearn. This is a process, but first it starts with your mindset switch. So those of you who are tuned in right now, you're supporting independent Black media, and it's important that we keep supporting. Share this out. What I love most is that each person you see on this platform has their own identity, but has been willing to come in as a collaborative. And just think, if we started to move this way as the masses, as a collaborative, because my light, me unplugging one light doesn't mean I have to, the light doesn't shine. You can still be your light bulb and shine the light on someone else. This right here is a representation of what it looks like to have collaboration within our own community. There's so much more work to be done. This is just the beginning. This is 7 Generations Black. So until next time, peace and love, family. And remember, hustle hard for your 7 Generations Black, because we will win. 7 Generations Black. Share this out on your network. Right. We appreciate each and every one of you. CTN Media.
Shay, Jice, let me get this last one. I want to throw this out to the people. Right?
Oh, yeah. We got lethal. Why did we do that?
He started it. He was like, closeout started. Jice interrupted. So it was really Jice's part.
Hold on. I want to leave people with this. Where you sit when you're old shows where you stood in your youth.
How the bag?
Part 2's coming. Part 2. So that means next Tuesday, same time, same place. Invite a friend to join you on this liberatory discussion, because there's so much more. 7 Generations Black. Peace and love, family.